My name is Carol Grafford. I am a follower of the Vietnamese Zen Buddhist master Thich Nhat Hanh. If this is your first time here, welcome. If it's been a long time since you've been here, welcome back. And I always feel so welcomed to be asked to offer the message, generally once a month. So today my talk is called Buddha Meets the Boy Who Cried Wolf. Do you remember Aesop's Fables? The children's stories that always had a moral at the end? I remember the moral of The Boy Who Cried Wolf as don't tell lies, although I read a version of it printed in the 50s that the moral was stated as no one believes a liar even when they tell the truth. So that was a little different. But what if we looked at this story through a Buddhist lens? What lessons could we learn? I found at least 6 lessons hidden in the 2 versions that I'll share today. And let's just look deeply together at this story and see if we can apply it in our own lives. So you may remember, who remembers the boy who cried wolf? Like most people, yeah, okay. So the quick wrap up. There's a village, there's some sheep. There's the boy who has reached the age where it's his duty, his job, his responsibility to go be the watcher, be the guard, and look for wolves. I'm sorry, I have nothing against wolves. Wolves are great. But they're always the bad guy in all of Aesop's fables, so that's just, we'll just have to deal with that. So this particular boy is out on his guard duty, and it so happens that he's, naughty, mischievous, perhaps manipulating, just needs a lot of attention, I don't know. And so he's out there and he says, man, I'm bored, I'll just yell wolf, which he does, and of course the village panics. Now, I don't know what that village was like. I expect there were sheep to be taken care of, so guys get their pitchforks, they stop doing whatever they do. There's probably chickens that got to be put all into the hen house and locked up and kept safe. What about the 2-year-old that's out in the yard? You probably better put that kid, all the kids, in their house. So everybody who is abandoning the things they were doing, right? So the baker stops baking and the bread gets burned or the yeast doesn't rise or I don't know what, and the soup boiled over and put out the fire so nobody gets to eat lunch today or whatever it is. And then there's no wolf. I don't know, a few days go by and it happens all exactly again. I'm bored, I'm gonna call wolf. Everybody gets upset, nothing happens, okay. And a couple more days go by, oh my goodness, an actual wolf shows up. The kid yells wolf, those people go, we're not stupid. They ain't doing nothing. The wolf shows up, and the wolf eats somebody, and I don't remember if it was a sheep or a chicken or a small child or the boy who cried wolf, but somebody got eaten. Somebody got eaten, and I did read that in one of them. The boy got eaten. But at any rate, harm occurred. So that's the story. Now, I would like to tell a slightly different version of that story. What if, instead of the boy really needs attention or needs to control the situation in some way, what if this boy is just overly sensitive to stimuli? What if this boy is out there at his guard post and he sees movement in the trees? And in fact, it's a bird fluttering from one low branch to another, but that stimuli, that's like, well, I gotta do my job, yell wolf! Right? Because people are like that. I mean, people are. There's the people who don't respond to anything. There's the quote normal people, and there's the people who over-respond to things, and that's just how we are. And so, what if it was that? What if this poor kid is out there and thinks there's really a wolf and yells wolf twice, and then the 3rd time they just don't trust him, and there is a wolf, right? So what I'm looking at is that in the first version, the Buddhist terms would be ego. That kid's got ego. Ego craves something. It craves attention, maybe. Or it craves this desire, this need, this craving to control the situation. Manipulating people is a way of controlling things, making things jump. So those are great Buddhist words. There's ego, there's craving, and of course there's wrong speech, because he did tell a lie. There was nothing at all. He did tell a lie, and harm ensues. So in the second version, what we have is what the Buddhists would call ignorance or delusion. And ignorance and delusion mean the same thing in Buddhism. They mean, I see this as reality, but actual reality is over here. It's not the same. It's not the same. So they would look at that lack of awareness of the bigger picture. Just there. Now, let's look at the villagers. So I don't think the Buddha used the term reactive, but modern Buddhists all do. The villagers were very much reactive. Their stimuli was hearing wolf, and they reacted with panic, fear, and or anxiety. That was their initial reaction. And I think that's pretty reasonable. I mean, that was how their whole culture was set up, right? That seemed pretty reasonable. And so they did that twice, and then the third time around, they were reactive, but they were angry. Oh, that kid, he's yelling again, in either version, right? They're yelling again. And anger is a reactive emotion as well. So we're looking at, right here in this little story, what the Buddhists call the three poisons, which are seen as the basic roots of suffering, of causing harm and suffering. So we have greed and craving, if it's the first version. We have anger or hatred, because those villagers are pretty angry. We have ignorance and delusion, if we're looking at the second version with the boy. And that these three poisons, greed or craving, anger or hatred, ignorance or delusion, those are the things that lead us to suffering. Now, what I found really interesting in looking at these two versions is that the intentionality of the boy makes no difference to the villagers. They have the same reactive pattern. They don't know whether the kid's lying or the kid's just overly sensitive. They don't know anything. They just know it's his job to call wolf, and they react. And then after a couple times, now their reaction is anger. So his intention doesn't really matter for the villagers. Now, I'd just like to talk a little bit, because I do have some medical background about reactivity. So reactivity, when that adrenaline rush hits you, whether it's panic, fear, anxiety, or anger, it's all biologically the same thing going on in the body. And what goes on is, quite immediately, the blood pressure rises. The blood glucose starts to rise. And there's an entire cascade of inflammation on the microscopic level occurring throughout the whole body. So what I'm trying to say is that reactivity harms the body, always. And it's quite especially bad when there's no actual physical threat. And we all know this. We live with emotional threats all the time. Every time we turn on the news, we listen to the news, right? There's something horrible happening. It assaults us all the time. So how we react or respond to that or anything else in our life has a true impact on our physical being. But there's also emotional harm to the psyche. And this is definitely very Buddhist here, where we look at watering or cultivating or nourishing the various emotions that are within us. So are we watering panic, fear, anxiety, anger? Are we watering those emotions? Because whenever we do, we practice them. They get stronger. They become the more immediate way to respond to anything. It isn't a response, it's a reaction. Where what the Buddhists want us to do is to respond, to take a breath. Rather than react, to respond. So I have a different ending for the second version of the fable. Okay? So here we have this boy who is overreactive, and he can't help that. That's how he is. His causes and conditions have brought him to be there. What if we said, hey, as a village, hey, I think we made a mistake putting you in that job. What if you came home and stayed indoors most of the time, where your environment is more controlled, where you don't feel that panic? You could sew, you could clean, you could sweep the floor, you could wash stuff. That's all within your field of capacity. And what if we took your older sister? She's a couple years older than you. She has a different personality. She's not overreactive. She has the capacity to be a guard, to look. She looks in the forest or wherever she's supposed to be looking, and she's, okay, I see movement. Is that a bird? Is that a rabbit? Oh, that's a wolf. Okay, I'll yell now, that kind of thing. So that would be using skillful means and compassion, if you did it right, by placing a person who is more apt in a situation that fits, and not forcing a person to be in a situation that does not fit. So the couple of the language that the Buddhists would use is that this would be discerning wisdom. This is not a reaction. This is discerning wisdom. Chicken Little did not use discerning wisdom. The acorn fell on her head. She thought the sky was falling. It takes a minute. It doesn't even have to take a long time, but it takes a minute to have a little bit of that discernment, to be able to respond rather than react. So every time I look at like Aesop's fables or any other fables, they tend to say, have a moral that means don't do this or do that. But Buddhism doesn't really work that way at all. What Buddhism does is it invites you to look deeply, to discover and discern for yourself what is the right action for this moment at this time. So as I look at this story that I've wrangled around a couple different ways, can we apply it in our own lives? Do we have an ego that craves attention? Do we have a need, a desire, a strong attachment to controlling everything? Anything? A need to control, that's an ego-driven thing. Are we reactive with all of its subsequent harm to the body and the psyche? Buddhism asks us to look, to see what's real. Reactivity tends to jump to the worst case scenario, jumps to anger. Can we take a breath or 3 breaths when we feel that, when we notice that happening within us, and it happens within all of us? Could we use skillful means to interact with the world, to be non-harming? can we use discerning wisdom and compassion? Let's try it. It's worth the effort. Thank you.